EF0. This is the start, not of devastation, but of potential. A tornado that barely qualifies, yet still earns its name. Winds here reach 65 to 85 miles per hour. That's highway speed. And while that might not sound terrifying, remember, this isn't a straight-line wind. It spins, it twists, it moves with rotation and purpose. An EF0 tornado doesn't flatten buildings or flip cars. What it does is whisper across the landscape, like nature testing its strength. It rips a few shingles off roofs. It breaks small branches, maybe knocks over a poorly anchored sign. Light debris is picked up and scattered. A child's plastic chair lands 2 streets over. Garden tools disappear. A grill tumbles down a driveway. It's minor, almost laughable, until you realize this was a tornado. EF0 tornadoes usually last seconds, maybe a minute, but they leave a mark, subtle, scattered, but real. They rarely make the news, but meteorologists take note, because every giant starts small, and sometimes small is all it takes to remind us that the sky isn't always peaceful. Now, the wind intensifies. EF1, still called weak by classification, but weak is a relative word. With winds now surging between 86 and 110 miles per hour, this is where the destruction starts to feel personal. EF1s can tear the roof off a porch or rip siding from the walls. Windows that haven't been reinforced, gone. This is where trees start to break. Not just lose limbs, but snap entirely. Some fall across roads, others crush cars. Power lines come down, and the lights go out in entire neighborhoods. People rush to check their phones for weather alerts, if the cell towers are still working. What makes EF1 tornadoes unsettling is how selective they are. One house damaged, the next untouched. A trampoline twisted around a streetlight, while the swing set beside it remains upright. It doesn't follow logic. It doesn't obey pattern. It lands where it lands, and it leaves behind confusion. And then there's the sound. Survivors often describe a freight train, not a passing one, but one that barrels through your backyard. Roaring wind, crashing debris, and the unmistakable pressure change that makes your ears pop. It's not just noise, it's violence in the air. EF1 tornadoes aren't killers, but they leave injuries. Physical ones, emotional ones. The fear they generate is real, because now you know it can happen here. This wasn't Kansas or some faraway place on TV. This was your street, your town, and you realize, if this was only a level 1, what happens when it gets worse? The answer is EF2. At this stage, we're done with mild disruptions. We're done with inconvenience. EF2 tornadoes bring winds between 111 and 135 miles per hour. And these winds do not ask permission. EF2s are destroyers. They rip roofs completely off of houses, not just pieces, but full structures. Exterior walls can collapse. 2-story homes are turned into open boxes, exposed to the sky, furniture dangling off the edge, bedrooms torn open, closets blown apart. This is no longer about damage. This is about survival. A tornado of this strength doesn't toss patio furniture, it throws cars. Full-size sedans flipped on their roofs, pickup trucks rolled like dice. The debris field stretches for miles. Wood, metal, insulation, all shredded and flying through the air at deadly speeds. In a rural field, an EF2 can erase a barn in seconds. In a city, it leaves intersections clogged with wreckage. Stop signs bent, power lines tangled with tree limbs, entire buildings reduced to piles of lumber. This tornado doesn't skip around. It carves a path, a scar across the landscape. Inside the storm's reach, even shelter can feel like a gamble. Basements are safer, sure, but that doesn't stop the world above you from being torn apart. Upstairs might not exist when you come back. People who've ridden out EF2s describe the moment the roof comes off, not as loud, but as sudden. 1 second, there's a ceiling. The next, open sky. Emergency services respond within minutes, but the destruction makes movement hard. Roads blocked, sirens drowned by wind, and when the tornado finally lifts, silence takes over. A heavy, awful silence. The kind that lets you hear your own breath. The kind that only follows chaos. And the worst part? EF2s are common, far more common than you'd think. In many states, they're the most destructive storms people ever see, because while EF3s and beyond are rare, EF2s are frequent enough to ruin lives and neighborhoods. Insurance companies categorize them as major events. News outlets send helicopters. Relief organizations deploy volunteers. This is the turning point, where a tornado stops being just a weather event and becomes a memory etched in sharp, terrifying detail, where families don't just clean up, they rebuild, where the term considerable damage feels like an understatement. This is not the strongest tornado there is, but it's strong enough to change the course of lives, strong enough to make headlines, strong enough to make people pay attention, and it's only EF2. The scale doesn't stop here. What lies ahead makes even this seem calm by comparison. EF3, now the real terror begins. Winds between 136 and 165 miles per hour. That's the kind of force that doesn't just damage buildings, it rearranges them. These tornadoes don't tear off roofs anymore. They remove entire structures from their foundations, not piece by piece, whole. Imagine standing in a neighborhood that looks like it's been bombed, houses turned inside out, rooms no longer rooms, kitchens with no walls, toilets sitting exposed in the open, still bolted to fragments of tile, refrigerators found blocks away. What was once a family home becomes a pile of shredded lumber, insulation, and splintered beams. EF3s don't just snap trees, they uproot them. Full-grown oaks and maples wrenched from the ground like weeds, root systems torn apart, power poles buckle, cell towers twist like licorice. Even concrete structures, what we normally trust as safe, can crack or crumble. If you're outside when an EF3 touches down, there is no safe place to run. A flying piece of lumber can become a spear, a 2x4 shot through a wall like a missile. Vehicles are thrown, not tipped, thrown. School buses lifted, flipped, and tossed down the street like plastic toys. Semis rolled over on highways. Livestock vanishes. Survivors of EF3 tornadoes speak with a different kind of gravity. This is not just something they saw, it's something they felt in their bones. The pressure drop makes your ears ache, makes your chest tighten. The roar isn't a train anymore, it's 100 freight engines screaming at once. You don't just hear it, you feel it in the floor, in the walls, in your ribs. Inside a storm shelter, you pray it holds. You hope the debris doesn't pile in front of the door and trap you. You wonder what will be left when you open it again. For some, the answer is nothing. Entire neighborhoods wiped clean, not just damaged, gone. EF3 tornadoes aren't rare enough. They happen every year, somewhere. And when they do, they break records. Entire counties get declared disaster zones. Helicopters fly overhead to assess the damage because the roads are impassable. National Guard units are deployed. This is a tornado you don't recover from in days or weeks. For some, it's years. For others, they move away. Not just physically, mentally. Some never feel safe again. Not in storms, not in silence. And still, it gets worse. EF4. This is the storm that haunts meteorologists. Winds from 166 to 200 miles per hour. Wind strong enough to do things that don't make sense. Not just destruction, but obliteration. EF4 tornadoes don't tear buildings apart. They erase them. Multi-story homes reduced to bare slabs. Brick buildings pulverized. Industrial facilities turned to twisted metal, collapsed steel beams, and clouds of toxic dust. Think about a well-built home with a reinforced concrete foundation and hurricane clips. Now picture nothing left but the floor. EF4s are war zones, no exaggeration, and the debris becomes deadly. Cars are thrown like cannonballs, pieces of roofing become blades, trees stripped of bark, completely debarked, as if pressure washed by the sky, soil scoured away down to the roots. In some places, the ground is gouged, trenches carved where the vortex scraped the earth. This level of tornado doesn't just wreck towns, it alters them. Landmarks gone, schools destroyed, hospitals compromised. Emergency response struggles not because of scale, but because the infrastructure no longer exists. Ambulances can't drive through, fire departments have no station to return to, and the human toll rises fast. In an EF4, even basements aren't a guarantee. Stories emerge of people buried under rubble for hours, rescue teams working by hand, by flashlight, pulling survivors from ruins, calling for silence so they can hear voices under collapsed floors. The emotional scars run deep. Families are split apart, entire blocks reduced to matchsticks. If you were in your home and didn't make it to shelter in time, the outcome is often fatal. There's no romanticizing it. An EF4 is not a storm, it's a monster. A churning, howling, grinding machine of wind and destruction that touches down with the energy of a missile and the path of a bulldozer. Photographs after the fact don't do it justice, because a camera can't capture the weight of silence in the aftermath, or the screams, or the way the air smells, dust, wood, oil, blood, ozone. The way survivors hold each other, not because they're scared anymore, but because they can't believe they're alive. These are the storms that get names, that go into textbooks, that are studied, diagrammed, and revisited for years. Cities add new tornado sirens. Building codes change. Families buy storm shelters. Meteorologists use the radar footage in training for the next generation. But EF4 is not the top of the scale. There is one more. EF5, the rarest, the deadliest, the absolute ceiling of what we can classify. Winds exceeding 200 miles per hour. The official scale stops here, but the wind doesn't. Some EF5s have reached an estimated 300 miles per hour. At that point, you're not in a storm. You're inside a force of nature so powerful that even the term tornado feels inadequate. An EF5 does not leave debris, it leaves dust. Steel-reinforced buildings are twisted, torn from the earth. Asphalt is ripped from roads. Pavement, ripped. Ground, scored. Heavy machinery hurled like toys. A train locomotive pushed off its tracks and flung. Homes are vaporized, not moved, not broken, vaporized. In some cases, slabs are swept clean with not even plumbing left standing. The only clue a house existed is the mailbox across the street, bent but still upright. These tornadoes can grow to over a mile wide. They don't skip, they consume. Everything in the path. Trees, buildings, highways, people get swept into the vortex, never seen again. Vehicles disappear entirely. A full-size truck may land 3 miles away. Livestock and wildlife are gone. Their bodies often never found. A steel beam can be driven through a tree like a nail. Inside the funnel, physics behaves differently. The pressure is so low it can cause buildings to explode outward. The wind so fast it strips grass off a lawn. Entire forests are flattened, not just toppled, but leveled, as if bulldozed from above. And it's not just the tornado, it's what comes with it. Hail the size of grapefruits, lightning constantly flashing in the black-green sky, thunder so loud it drowns even the roar. A wall of wind moving faster than a speeding car, wrapped in rain, cloaked in dust and invisible until it's too late. EF5s leave a path you can see from space. These are the events that break communities, that change emergency policy, that prompt international aid. The 2011 Joplin tornado, the 1999 Bridge Creek Moore tornado, the 2013 Moore EF5. These aren't just names, they are memorials to what wind can do when it's fully unchained. And the worst part? There is no real defense. You can build an underground shelter, you can stock it with water, supplies, blankets, but once an EF5 forms and heads your way, you're relying on seconds. Warning systems might give you 5 minutes, sometimes less. Then it's you in the storm. When survivors speak about EF5s, they don't just tell stories. They relive trauma. They describe the sound not just as loud but alive, a sound that rattles your skeleton, a noise that overrides thought. People describe lying flat, holding children, hearing the walls rip away, and then nothing. A sudden vacuum of noise, followed by light, followed by the realization that the house is gone, but they're still there. And afterward, nothing is the same. EF1, the tornado with no evidence. It touched down, the sky swirled, the wind twisted, but it hit nothing. No barns, no trees, no fences, just open land or empty skies. And so, we're left with no damage to measure, no clues to rate. Meteorologists know it happened, radar saw it, maybe a chaser caught it, but without destruction, there's no category to assign. Not EF0, not EF5, just EF1, unknown. A ghost on the map. A storm that passed without a trace, but not without power. Proof that not every monster leaves footprints, but it was real all the same. And with that, we come to the end of our video. If you enjoyed watching this, don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for the next one.